The night everything spiraled out of control started with something so small, so ridiculously normal that I still laugh about it until I remember how it ended. All I did was change my Wi-Fi name. That's it. One harmless tweak. A bored decision on a quiet evening. But by midnight, police lights were flashing outside my house. Neighbors were watching from their windows. And the woman from the HOA, our very own self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, was screaming into her phone like she'd just uncovered a federal crime. My new Wi-Fi name. Free coffee, not for Karen. Yeah, petty? Maybe? But deserved? Absolutely. You see, Karen had been making my life miserable for months. Complaints about my trash bins being out too early, my car being too loud, my lawn not meeting her community standards. She wasn't even officially on the HOA board anymore, but that didn't stop her from acting like she owned the entire neighborhood. And somehow, she always managed to find something new to complain about. That evening, I'd finally had enough after another passive-aggressive note taped to my door. This one about my unacceptable recycling habits. I sat down, opened my router settings, and made the change. I figured it would give me a quiet laugh every time I connected my phone. What I didn't expect was for Karen to see it within the hour. Apparently, she was one of those people who constantly scanned for Wi-Fi networks. Maybe she was trying to snoop. Maybe she just liked knowing what was around her. Either way, she saw the name and she lost it. At first, it was just loud footsteps outside. Then came the banging on my door, sharp, aggressive, non-stop. I didn't answer. I knew exactly who it was. "Open this door right now!" she shouted. "This is harassment!" I stayed silent. A few minutes later, her voice faded, and I thought it was over. I even went back to watching TV, chuckling at how ridiculous the whole thing was. Then I heard it. Sirens, not distant, not passing by. They were getting closer, fast. I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and peeked through the blinds. Two police cars pulled up right in front of my house. My stomach dropped. Karen stood on the sidewalk, waving her arms wildly, pointing straight at my front door like she was identifying a suspect in a crime scene. And when one of the officers stepped out and looked directly at my house, I realized something chilling. She hadn't just complained. She had called 911, and whatever she told them, it was serious enough to bring multiple officers. What happened next wasn't just overreaction. It was something none of us saw coming. The knock on my door wasn't like Karen's earlier pounding. This one was controlled, firm, official. The kind that instantly tells you this is no longer neighborhood drama. It's something real. "Police department, open the door!" I took a breath, trying to steady myself, and walked over. As I opened the door, two officers stood there, calm but alert, their hands resting near their belts. Behind them, Karen lingered on the sidewalk, arms crossed, her expression smug, like she had just won something. "Evening," one of the officers said. "We received a call about a possible situation here. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" "Sure," I replied, stepping slightly outside. "What's going on?" The officer glanced back briefly at Karen before lowering his voice. "The caller reported suspicious activity tied to your internet network. Something about threatening messages and possible illegal interference." I blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," he said. It hit me instantly. "The Wi-Fi name." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is about my Wi-Fi name, isn't it?" The officers exchanged a quick look. "I changed it to something sarcastic," I explained. "That's literally it. No threats, no hacking, nothing illegal." Behind them, Karen suddenly stepped forward, unable to hold herself back. "He's lying!" she snapped. "I saw it! It's targeted harassment, and who knows what else he's doing on that network. People like him always escalate." One officer raised a hand toward her without even turning around. "Ma'am, please stay back while we handle this." Karen huffed but stayed where she was, muttering under her breath. The second officer looked at me more closely now. "Sir, do you mind if we verify a few things? Just to clear this up." "Go ahead," I said. I've got nothing to hide, as they asked me basic questions. How long I'd lived there, whether I'd had disputes with neighbors. It became painfully obvious that Karen hadn't just complained about a Wi-Fi name. She had painted a much darker picture. She mentioned possible cyber harassment and interference with emergency communications, one officer admitted carefully. I stared at him. Over a Wi-Fi name? He gave a small shrug. We respond to what we're told. That's when things shifted. The first officer glanced toward Karen again, this time with a different expression. Not annoyance, but curiosity. Like something about her story wasn't adding up. Hang tight, he told me. We're going to speak with the caller again. As they walked back toward her, I stayed on my porch, arms crossed, watching. Karen immediately launched into a dramatic explanation, her hands flying, her voice rising. Even from a distance, I could tell she was exaggerating, maybe even outright lying. But then, mid-sentence, one of the officers stopped her. He said something short, something that made her freeze, and whatever he asked next wiped the smug look right off her face. Because suddenly, Karen didn't look confident anymore. She looked nervous. From my porch, I could see everything unfolding in real time, like a slow-motion collapse of the story. Karen had so confidently built just minutes earlier. Her posture had changed completely. The woman who had been shouting, pointing, and practically celebrating my supposed downfall was now shifting her weight. Arms no longer crossed, her voice noticeably quieter. One of the officers spoke again, this time more firmly. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. You said there were threats. What exactly did the network say? Karen hesitated. It was implied, she stammered. The name itself is aggressive. It's directed at me. The officer didn't react. Ma'am, we need specifics. Did it contain any direct threats? Any illegal content? She paused again, longer this time. Well, no, but… And the interference with emergency services you mentioned? He pressed. Now that got my full attention. Karen's eyes darted briefly in my direction before snapping back to the officer. I just meant, if he's capable of this kind of harassment, who knows what else he's doing? That was it. No evidence, no real claim, just speculation dressed up as an emergency. The second officer, who had been quietly observing, stepped in. Ma'am, calling 911 is for actual emergencies. Misusing it is a serious matter. Karen straightened slightly, defensive again. I felt threatened. Isn't that enough? The officer's tone didn't change. Feeling uncomfortable and reporting a crime are not the same thing. Back on my porch, I let out a slow breath. The tension in my chest started to ease, but something told me this wasn't over yet. And I was right. Because just as the officers seemed ready to wrap things up, one of them glanced down at a small notepad in his hand, then back at Karen. There's one more thing, he said. Karen blinked. What? You mentioned earlier that you've been monitoring this network for some time. She froze again. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I just noticed it recently, she corrected quickly. The officer tilted his head slightly. That's not what you said before. Silence. A heavy, uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch across the entire street. Even the neighbors watching from their windows didn't move. Something had just shifted, and this time it wasn't in Karen's favor. The officer took a step closer to her, his voice lowering, more serious now. Ma'am, have you been attempting to access or interfere with your neighbor's private network? Karen's face went pale. No, of course not, she snapped, but it came out too fast, too sharp, too rehearsed. The officers exchanged another look, and in that moment, I realized something chilling. This was no longer about a Wi-Fi name. They had just uncovered something else. Something Karen definitely didn't want them to find. The energy on the street had completely shifted. What started as a ridiculous complaint about a Wi-Fi name had now turned into something far more serious, and Karen knew it. You could see it in the way she stood there, stiff and cornered, her earlier confidence completely gone. I already told you, I didn't do anything. she insisted. But her voice lacked the sharp authority it had before. Now it sounded strained, defensive. The officer didn't argue. Instead, he asked calmly, "Ma'am, do you have any devices on you right now? A phone, tablet, laptop?" Karen hesitated, just for a second, but that was enough. I have my phone," she said, holding it up slightly. "May I see it?" That's when she pushed back. "Why? I didn't do anything wrong!" "Because," the officer replied evenly, "you made a report involving potential cyber activity. We need to verify the claim." There was a pause, a long one. Finally, with clear reluctance, Karen handed over her phone. From where I stood, I couldn't see the screen, but I could see the officer's expression as he scrolled. At first, neutral, then focused, then something else entirely. He glanced at his partner, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, what is this?" Karen's eyes widened. "What? It's nothing!" The second officer stepped closer, looking over his partner's shoulder. And then he said it. "You've been attempting to connect to multiple private networks in this area." Repeatedly. My stomach dropped, but not for me. For her, Karen immediately shook her head. "That's not illegal! Anyone can see networks." "That's true," the officer replied. "But attempting to bypass security? Using apps designed to gain unauthorized access? Silence. The kind of silence that says everything without a single word." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her face had gone completely pale now. "I was just checking my signal!" She tried, weaker this time. The officer didn't respond right away. Instead, he continued scrolling. "Ma'am, you also have screenshots here. Saved network names, notes about signal strength, even passwords labeled as possible." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't casual scanning. This was deliberate. And suddenly, her obsession with my Wi-Fi name made a lot more sense. She hadn't just been annoyed by it. She had been watching it, tracking it, trying to get into it. The second officer stepped back slightly, crossing his arms. "So let me get this straight. You called 911 claiming harassment and illegal activity while you were actively attempting to access your neighbor's private network?" Karen didn't answer. She couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. The first officer handed the phone back slowly, his tone now completely different, firmer, official. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside." Karen stood frozen on the sidewalk, her phone now back in, her hand but suddenly useless, like the control she thought she had. Over the situation had completely slipped away. The flashing police lights painted everything in sharp red and blue, and for the first time since this all started, she looked small. "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "please step over here." She didn't move at first. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The officer didn't sugarcoat it. "We're investigating a possible misuse of emergency services and unauthorized attempts to access private networks." That hit her harder than anything else had all night. "I didn't do anything!" she snapped, but there was no confidence left in it. No fire, just panic. From my porch, I watched as the second officer gently but clearly guided her a few steps away. Not aggressive, not forceful, just enough to separate her from the scene she had tried to control. Meanwhile, the first officer walked back toward me. "Sir," he said, his tone now calm and almost apologetic, "thank you for your patience. It appears this situation was misrepresented." "That's one way to put it," I replied. He gave a slight nod. "You're not in any trouble. Changing your Wi-Fi name, even to something sarcastic, is not illegal." I couldn't help but smile a little. "Good to know." Behind him, Karen's voice rose again, desperate now. "This is ridiculous! He started it! That name is harassment." Both officers turned toward her at the same time. "Ma'am," one of them said, "a Wi-Fi name you don't like is not a crime." That was the moment it fully collapsed. Everything she had built, every complaint, every accusation, every attempt to control the neighborhood, fell apart in front of everyone watching. And people were watching. Curtains had shifted. Doors had cracked open. A couple of neighbors had even stepped outside, drawn by the commotion. They weren't whispering anymore. They were staring at her. The officer closest to Karen spoke again, this time with finality. "We're documenting this incident. You may be subject to charges related to false reporting and attempted unauthorized access. Do you understand?" Karen didn't respond. She just nodded faintly, her earlier arrogance completely gone. Within minutes, the officers returned to their cars. The lights stayed on a moment longer, then clicked off, leaving the street quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one felt different, heavier. As the police drove away, Karen didn't say another word. She turned and walked back to her house, avoiding every single pair of eyes on her. And just like that, the woman who called 911 over a Wi-Fi name became the cautionary story of the entire neighborhood. As for me, I went back inside, sat down, and looked at my Wi-Fi settings. I thought about changing the name again, but this time, I decided to keep it.